Journal. Protagoras sold firewood. Democritus liked the way he bundled it for carrying and hired him to be his secretary. Mind is evident in the patterns it makes, inner, outer. To discern these patterns is to be a philosopher. The caterpillar of the coddling moth feeds on the kernels of apples and pears. Greek time is in the eye, anxious about transitions, beard, loss of boyish beauty. Hebrew time is in the ear. Hear, O Israel. What the Greek gods say does not make a body of quotations. They give no laws, no wisdom, but what they look like is of great and constant importance. Yahweh, invisible, is utterly different. The American's automobile is his body. Camillus had asked for pure youths, and the adjutant, without a blink, about-faced, looking wildly for a warrant officer. Pure youths, said the warrant officer. Clean, said the adjutant. Scrubbed. Young means they won't have had time to sin with any volume. Say recruits who aren't up to their eyes in debt, fresh of face, calf's eyes, good stock, washed hair. Take them to the flamen, who'll get white tunics on them, and clarify their minds for going into the phanom, to bring the figure out proper. To sit in the sun and read Columella on how to plant a thorn hedge is a pleasure I had to teach myself. No, I was teaching myself something else, and the thorn hedge came, wisely, to take its place. They're longer lasting than stone walls, and have an ecology all their own. Birds nest in them, and snails use them for a world. Hedgehogs, rabbits, snakes, spiders, briar rose, dogthorn. There are some in England still standing from Roman times. Being ought to have a ground, the earth under our feet, and a source. It seems to have neither. The Big Bang Theory is science fiction. It may be that the expanding universe is an illusion born in physics labs in Paris, Copenhagen, and Berkeley. It is also too eerily like Genesis, being in a millisecond, and other creation myths. It is partly medieval, partly Jules Verne. From a human point of view, it has no philosophical or ethical content. It is, as a vision, a devastation, an apocalypse at the wrong end of time. It is a drama in which matter and energy usurp roles that once belonged to gods and angels. It is without life, brutally mechanical. It is without even the seeds of life or the likelihood. Stowe Velby, earliest record of agriculture in Denmark. Naked barley, club wheat, einkorn, emma wheat, and a seed of gallium. Gibbon turns an idea in his fingers. French regularity is kept alive as a spirit by turbulence and variation. Only a felt classicism knows novelty. Novelty in the USA is a wheel spinning in futility. It has no tangential ground to touch down and roll upon. Je ne veux pas mourir, idiote. French student demanding that Greek be put back in the curriculum. The circumcision of Gentiles in the USA is a cruel and useless mutilation. Michael Tournier in Le Vent Paraclete likens it to removing the eyelids. It is an ironic turn of events. The circumcision of the Old Testament was a slicing away of the merest tip of the foreskin, the acropostion, as the Greeks called it. In the Hellenizing period of the 1st century CE, see Maccabees, the rabbinate changed over to total removal of the prepuce to make a more decisive symbol. Gentiles began to circumcise fairly recently, a Victorian attempt, one among many, to prevent masturbation. A. Housman was circumcised at 13. It is done nowadays by parents so ignorant that they don't know it doesn't need to be done, and doctors, always ready for another buck, recommend it on hygienic principles. It is difficult to think of another such institutionalized, gratuitous meanness, the brutal insensitivity of which enjoys universal indifference. A Tiresian conundrum, a male who has never known the sensuality of a foreskin, both for masturbation and for making love, cannot know what he has been so criminally bereft of. If the Jews return to cutting away the wedding ring's worth of flesh, as with Michelangelo's David, who has almost all of a foreskin, and as with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, a nicely revolutionary recovery of archaic truth, perhaps American parents would quit agreeing to the mutilation of their children's bodies. But as long as Anne Landers et ci continue to idiotize the populace with a rancid puritanism, maiming boys will continue. It is the Saurian mind that has prevailed in our time. Apollo has been asleep for most of the century. Klee's twittering machine is a parody of Goya's people out along a limb. What is the difference between learning as a child and as an adult? There's such a thing as relearning. Nietzsche says that philosophy might take as its task the reconciliation of what a child has to learn and knowledge acquired, for whatever reason, in maturity. What's happening when children watch TV? Consciousness is an ad hoc response to a webwork of stimuli, intrusions, attractions, claims on one's attention, hurts, disappointments, insults, fears. The critical mind tries to keep its balance in stoic indifference, but turbulence aerates, renews a sense of balance. The impotence of Andrew Wyeth is that he asks us to see with his eyes subjects about which he has made a decision, and, with the gratuitous meanness of his generation, isn't going to tell us what it is. There is no drama of seeing, as in Picasso and John Sloan. Wyeth makes us into an adventitious onlooker at something he and only he was privileged to see. What got Kipling a bad name among liberals is his intelligence, humor, and affection. These they cannot tolerate in anybody. Sartre's idea of literature, the opposite of Pound's, is still within the category that includes Pound. The word political has a wholly different meaning in the USA than in France. Our politicians have no interest whatever in changing society or of making life more liberal. How can they, with the people who have to be sat on, and with criminal exploitation ready to corrupt any liberal exploration of liberty? There is no reversal possible of American mediocrity, which will worsen until we have total depravity of the idea of freedom. There is no American business, only diddling the consumer. The Congress is as incompetent and irresponsible a squanderer of our money as the most loutish tyrant in history. History is a matter of attention. Parkman was interested in the awful waste of energy in the wholly unsuccessful conversion of the Indian. Because he was so appalled by Catholic fanaticism in Canada, what he wrote is a history of reason in the New World. Denmark begins at the SAS ticket counter, JFK, behind a contingent from Lake Wobegon, whose problem is made more complex by a computer that's down. Waiting, I solve a problem of my own. The second floor of SAS is, as its sign in Danish says, the other floor. For years I've wondered why in the English ordinals there's the Latin secundus between first and third, the only Mediterranean intrusion into a sequence that's otherwise archaically North Atlantic. But the Danes count first, another, third, fourth. Our another is one other, and the repetition of the one must have crowded so useful a word out of the ordinals to be replaced with monkish or military Latin. English is a romance language, the way a porpoise is a fish, and a bat a bird. English is the second, or other, language of Denmark, used among themselves with a fluency that is well along toward making it a dialect. A little babu, fried chickens on a menu. We do not, thank goodness, have the first hotel we called in Copenhagen, because the booking have gone to Easter. Danish, like Dutch, is English unmarried to French. On Swedish TV, a children's program with a robot who has a spigot for a penis. Another sign that the Danes are a highly moral people who are unembarrassed by the facts of life. Also, some comic books and posters. You'd go to jail for owning in Kentucky. Just as Denmark looks familiar, though we've not been here before, the restaurant Cassiopeia on Nyhavn is wholly unthreatening. Cozy, strangely familiar. I have the feeling that I've been trying all my life to get here. We have a table by an old-fashioned window of many small panes looking out on masts, rain, 16th century buildings. We see that Danish cozy is our sense of cozy. Waitress very young, beautiful, friendly. Fish soup, terrine, veal, kidney. A pear and almond ice drenched in a liqueur. Bonnie Jean, the whiz at arithmetic, notes that our meal costs $80. I buy a blue denim cap, very Danish student of the last century, and call it my Nietzsche cap, remembering that he ordered a Danish student's uniform when he learned that Georg Brandes was lecturing on him at the university here. Bonnie Jean counters by buying a Lutheran housewife's dress, demure, practical, and quite becoming. The restaurants on Nyhavn are run by children. The cook at the Mary Rose, Einar, looks 12, and the waiters are teenagers. A profoundly northern feel to the graveyard where Kierkegaard and Hans Christian Andersen lie. Pale sunlight, wet conifers. Sign in a barbershop. Taget till Spanien för att bekämpa fascismen kommer strax. Gone for the day to Spain to fight fascism. Back soon. At the zoo, which Joyce and Nora once visited in the 30s, a little boy hugging a goat said to me, I was photographing him, I am cute, am I not? Of course, all young Danes are beautiful, Bonnie Jean says. They drown the plain ones. It is apparently against the law to be plain, ill-natured, or sober. The water birds we find in every pond are perhaps grebes. I name them Bonnie's coot. They can run along the surface of water. Along the pedestrian street, a young man seated on a four-wheeled contrivance, which several friends are pushing. His virile member is out, through his fly, silly and bemused look on his face, and erect. One of the friends carrying a sign, Ja, jeg skal gifte. Oh boy, do I ever need a wife. They're all gloriously drunk. BJ is a bit disturbed by so much drunkenness. I point out that they're not drivers. They're wonderfully on foot. Earlier, two 12-year-old boys so drunk that they have to walk hugging to keep from falling down. Music everywhere. Children playing Mozart and Telemann on the pedestrian streets. BJ gives all the change she has to a 4-year-old tot who is making a hash of something baroque on her Suzuki fiddle. The sweet pan steel drum band. Lunch at the train station in Roskilde, far superior to the best food and service to be had in Lexington. Roast pork, red cabbage, wine, potatoes, banana split. Bonnie Jean, of fellow Americans in Elsinore, travel is very narrowing. BJ insists that I buy a Danish scout manual and a pair of important-looking straps, blue, lettered Spedersport. BJ does not keep a journal, but asks that I put in this one, honesty is the best deceiver. Questions are a way of avoiding information. Rietveld's chair at the Louisiana Musée. It is much smaller than I thought and looks comfortable. Years ago I wrote in Tatlin that the Baltic is pewter and silver in its lakes of glare. It is. Helsingør, coffee and pastry shop, center of local social life. Suddenly all very Bergman, an accurately scaled midget across from me, nattily dressed, and with a woman who seems to be made up for a Strindberg role, dressed about 1880, but obviously not all there. Housewives talk about her behind their hands. Eventually a rough sailor type, red-bearded and in a pea jacket, comes and takes her away. She rolls her hips and eyes as she leaves. The midget continues his coffee. No sign of a circus in town. A long walk through the deer park at Klampenborg, sharing Granny Smith apples, children orienteering in all directions. A little boy greets us with, "Oh, yes, oh, yes." The landscape is a constable. Immense sense of peace, love, togetherness. Boy, with mother, rich dark hair, pink scarf, nautical jacket, grey canvas trousers, big sneakers. Relation with mother wholly un-American, more like kids falling in love on a first date. Bonnie invents Holstein cat for the bishops, Webster and Thorvaldsen, whom we speak to every day. The Bishop of Copenhagen is also Bishop of Greenland, part of his parish. The statue of Kierkegaard in the garden of the National Library is Lincoln-esque, noble, grandiose, seated with a Bible propped against his chair, writing. The newer triumphant statue in the circle of theologians around the palace church is of Kierkegaard the dandy in tight breeches, foppish. Like Jack Horner, who sat in a corner. The Horner is the Danish Hjørnet, corner. Where it was, there must you begin to be. There are no depths, only distances. Memory shuffles, scans, forages. Freud's geological model implies that last year is deeper in memory than last week, which we all know to be untrue. The memories we value are those we have given the qualities of dream and narrative, and which we may have invented. An American evangelist on Swedish TV reminds me that kinship is one of the most primitive of tyrannies. Our real kin are those we have chosen. Desire is attention, not gratification of the self. The ego is the enemy of love. Happiness is always a return. It must have been out of itself to be anything at all. If time-space, then how does time move and space stand still? Time moves through us, we move through space. County as the satiric unit. Coconino, Bloom, Yoknapatawpha, Raintree, Tolkien's Shire, the provinces. Tragedy. House, castle, room. Romance. Sea and open country. City. Comedy. The hope of philosophy was to create a tranquility so stable that the world could not assail it. This stability will always turn out to be a madness or obsession or brutal indifference to the world. Philosophy is rather the self-mastery that frees one enough of laziness, selfishness, rage, jealousy, and such failures of spirit to help others, write for others, draw for others, be friends. Athens, which could not tolerate Socrates, and Jerusalem, which could not tolerate Jesus, come down in history as the poles of the ancient world for Proust, Arnold, Joyce, Sukowski. If these two long traditions have fused, they have no genetic line. Judaism is closed, is itself exclusively. Athens is diffused and lost. This paradox, that where exact truth must be found, the only guide thereto is intuition, the soul moving like the animal it is by a sixth sense, which Heraclitus called smell, thinking of the exquisite nose of his dog. All the senses must be opened and trained, exercised, clarified. Psychology is the policeman of the bourgeoisie, enforcing middle-class values with as bogus a science as alchemy or palm reading. Foucault was right on this point. In Kafka, other people are too close, and God is too far off.